Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Joanne Smedley, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Francis Beaumont. We warmly welcome the family of Private George Dunne, whose story will be told shortly. We also acknowledge Air Vice Marshal Kim Osley of the RAAF and Colonel Chris Choate of the USAF. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors. Please stand and join in the singing of the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private George Dunne. George Dunne was born on the 3rd of June 1918 in Cootamundra, New South Wales, to William and Louisa Dunne. He attended Mogo and Batemans Bay public schools, and as a young man helped his father build the family home in Batemans Bay. Known by the nickname Slim, he was working as a forestry labourer before the advent of the Second World War. Dunne enlisted on the 4th of December 1940 in Sydney and was marched out to the Australian Army Medical Corps training depot. In January 1941, he was granted pre-embarkation leave and in March was transferred to the 210 Field Ambulance, which was part of the 8th Division. As war with Japan loomed, rather than being sent to the Middle East to join the other Australian divisions, the 8th Division was deployed across the Asia-Pacific region. Dunne embarked from Melbourne in July 1941 and landed in Singapore a few weeks later before moving to the Malay Peninsula. Following the Japanese invasion in December 1941, the 210 Field Ambulance provided medical support to 230 Infantry Battalion's ambush at Gemmis, and various parts of the unit were then involved in the withdrawal to Singapore itself. When the Japanese attacked Singapore on the night of the 8th of February 1942, the 8th Division was too weak and dispersed to hold them back, initiating a disorganised retreat towards the centre of the island. A week later, over 130,000 troops, including 15,000 Australians, were surrendered to the Japanese. In the aftermath of the fall of Singapore, Private Dunne became a prisoner at Changi. While many Australian prisoners of war held here would go on to work on the notorious Thai-Burma Railway, Dunne was one of over 4,000 Australian prisoners of war sent to camps in Japan. In early December, Dunne was transferred to the newly established camp in Kobe with a capacity of 600. Going to work at the dockyard, 5 kilometres from the camp by train, the Australian, British and Dutch prisoners worked building ships and transporting materials for the Kawasaki Heavy Industry Company. At the camp, the prisoners were abused and beaten, forced to perform arduous labour while physically unfit, and refused medical care. 51 prisoners died at the camp. The Japanese winters took a particularly heavy toll on prisoners, and on the 13th of March 1943, George Dunne was reported as ill. He succumbed to acute pneumonia 2 days later. His remains were cremated and placed in Juganji Temple in Osaka. After the war, his remains were brought to Yokohama War Cemetery. He was 24 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Dunne, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down in the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.